head, but I do work for I work for a nonprofit music performance organization. I'm a musician. And so I felt that fallout as well, because I was furloughed from my job for about a year. So I was out of work, and I began painting, and my HomePod people were like, hey, you want to paint 3 cards of a tarot deck? We need a way to support our community emotionally, and we think tarot would be really a good way to do that. And you're painting and you're not working, so how about you paint 3 cards, just 3 cards? And so I started painting, and I just fell into this project in a way. It was a way for me to process the failures of the institutions that I was a part of. It was a way for me to start to process the tragedy of the moment and the anxiety of the moment, and also to like find humor in that moment, which was so needed for me in that time. And I think that those things resonated with people, and so we ended up like, I ended up like devoting like, weeks of my life, months of my life to making this little thing. And now there are people all over the country and even the world who are reading from this deck and using it to help themselves and help each other, in a way that, using a tool that they didn't have before. And we're all connected in this way that we weren't before, which has really been amazing to be part of. Stephanie, anything you want to say?
Thanks, Claire, for the popcorn. Yeah, I came to the connection to the VFC through both Hannah and Brian, the 2 of the co-founders, who are both here as well today. We are connected by virtue of our academic and now academic adjacent lives. It's something that the 3 of us have discussed over time, and they, together with Liz and other powerhouses, came together to form the VFC. And I was very lucky and touched that they let me profile them for a piece that came out in Hyperallergic that was about what VFC is doing more broadly, but I think certainly because of the artistic prowess of our one and only Claire, that they were super excited to feature the piece in the tarot deck. So I just continue to be here and to be proud of the work that they've done. And again, I'm really happy that we're all in conversation. It seems that for Queens and Teresa, to whom I'm connected from a prior publishing life, and the VFC have really shared commonalities in space and vision. So, yay.
Oh, let me go off mute. It's so amazing. We can welcome back Teresa. You're back from the future. Thank you.
I am back from the future. Yeah, sorry about that. I've never had this happen where my Zoom is just totally crashed on my computer. So I logged in finally on my phone. So I'm assuming everybody's gone around and spoken. And did people mention a card that they really resonate with too?
Not yet. We should definitely do that.
Okay. Yeah. So that would be a great way to also, I think, get a little bit more into the deck, is for everyone to just also bring a card into the space, that's something that you particularly resonate with.
And I also want to say, like, just in like the creation that's happened because of the Panini or the Ponderosa or the Panorama or the Pythagorean theorem, that like, what an incredible thing to come out of this. And so yeah, I would love to like hear or see what cards are resonating with you today.
And if people want to follow along, I think that Shameka just dropped the link, but I'll just isolate it here. You can see all the images of the cards as we talk about them at that link. Just scroll down.
Claire, why don't you go first?
Okay, I chose today to bring in, I thought about it a lot because my card is usually the Arboretum in our academic tarot deck, which is traditionally the Empress card. But I chose today, I was feeling like It's time for new beginnings. I feel like I'm in the middle of new beginnings, and so I chose to bring the grad student. I'll send it over to Liz.
Thank you. I was about to jump in and say, why the grad student, Claire? But you told us, new beginnings. I also almost did the grad student just because I really love in our deck that the grad student is, card 0, or the card that sometimes doesn't have a number, right? So, if we're thinking about cartomancy, then the grad student, going through the major arcana or arcana, right, which is our deck, that it's the grad student's journey. But instead, I think I'm actually going to say the job market. And I know that this is actually a really weird card to resonate with, but I don't know why. I think maybe, I don't know what's going on in my life that I'm resonating with this right now. But, traditionally, this is the Wheel of Fortune card. And I think maybe I've just been thinking a lot about what's kind of going on in the background of this card lately. Claire's amazing art where there are folks that are trying to hang on and that are falling off of this roller coaster, right? But I think, in traditional tarot, the Wheel of Fortune, there's karma, there's balance in the universe, change is always coming, this kind of warning that change is going to happen. But in this card, I think there's the possibility to just not get on the roller coaster. And I think I've been sitting with that since Teresa asked us to kind of isolate a card, what it's like to just not get on the roller coaster, or not get on the roller coaster that is the job market. So that's me. Maybe Stephanie?
Yes. Hi. I've been sitting for a very long time with the adjunct, the Hanged Man, both in its upright and reversed orientations. I've been in a moment of transition for about a year, and I'm not sure transition can apply to a whole year. I've been thinking about that as well. I actually am also adjuncting right now, which is not won't be a sustained thing, but it's really making me think about how we want to conceive of, or at least how I want to conceive of, new opportunities and new perspectives, and how I get so rooted in thinking about them as feeling stalled and feeling constrained, and really just looking at the constraints of that new perspective instead of seeing the abundance that it might actually, or I think can very much promote. And I think I'm just sort of coming out of feeling so hooked by that framework. So I think I'm sort of coming out of the adjunct card and moving elsewhere, but it's still the one that I think about, when I'm going to bed.
Yeah. So for a good while, the Arboretum was my card. And lately, I've been sort of feeling more of this. And just feeling a sense of wanting to do the work that is grounded in justice and community and love, and also being super righteous about not being impeded in my ability to do that work. So recently, 3 other colleagues and I got a pretty major Mellon Foundation grant. It's a $3 million grant to do it's the Digital Ethnic Futures Consortium, and it is to build capacity at regional public institutions, focusing on curriculum development around ethnic studies and digital humanities, but also built into that, and what was really important for me was an institutional commitment to be better community partners. And so an investment in developing meaningful and long-lasting sustainable relationship with the communities that we inhabit. So that's been really important for me. It is a difficult task because I think it's requiring people to rethink ideas of service, of community engagement, and and to, you know, I also teach at a Hispanic serving institution, but these institutions are still predominantly white institutions, right? And so there's a lot of rethinking that needs to happen. There are a lot of retentions that are very difficult to shake loose. And it's so far been a heavy challenge, but I think we're at a moment when we have to commit to do this work, and we have to commit to not accepting what always was and the ways that things have always been done. So I'm really invested in thinking about sort of building community, but also shaking foundations and shaking things loose. Stephanie will tell me whether, Liz, you'll tell me whether the card is right or not, or if it's just, it's just all in my head.
The cohort is the lovers, right? Yeah, finding that. Sonya, that was beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah, beautiful all around. And again, I apologize for the funky internet here. But Sonya, I'd love to have felt like, first of all, congratulations on the grant. That sounds amazing. And it sounds like it's also a project that extends across a few different institutions. I could be reading into that. But I would love to hear, you know, as I was thinking about all of us convening together, I was also thinking about sort of the possibilities of digital humanities as I understand it. I admittedly, I'm by no means someone who knows tons about the digital humanities, but it struck me that that there's a kind of parallel in thinking about these technologies, like using something like the Tarot and also digital humanities, and also the way that VFC is using digital humanities projects, right? Like on your website to think across a broader, to this digital future, and to think more broadly about even what community is too across institutions. So I would love to hear more from all of you about that kind of intersection, or sort of like potentials of digital humanities and how that intersects with other kinds of technologies, such as like the Tarot. But we don't have to be talking about the Tarot all the time either.
Getting my thoughts together.
Yeah.
I think that I'll start by saying that I think, one of the things, so I've been doing digital humanities for almost 10 years now in academia, and it's mostly always been in alternative academic roles. So like outside of the tenure track, outside of the adjunct life, even though, I've always been on the cusp of it because I've been on contract work a lot. And I think the radical potential of the digital humanities, as I've seen it and as I see it now, is that it allows us to engage with the way that we build our technological futures, or that we think about our futures, and that we think about labor in particular. Like I remember when I first, when I heard about digital humanities first, I was like, oh, this has completely exploded the way that I think about academic labor, because we don't think about it actually, I think, in academia all that much, or maybe I certainly didn't, right? And then once you start thinking about labor, you start thinking about all of the intersections of like how people are treated in academia, and whose labor is valued and whose labor is not valued. And so I think that DH gives us this kind of framework. I don't think it's, DH methodology means like digital tools, right? And we can talk about that, and we can talk about like using the power of digital tools to do some of the things that VFC is doing. But I also think that DH gives us a framework that can either be used for like ill in neoliberal circles or for good, to kind of challenge to challenge the like pre-existing conditions of academia and tech and industry, which is some of the things I'm doing in other circles right now too, is kind of bringing that I think sense of solidarity, right? Labor solidarity into those circles. But yeah, so that I think I'd start there.
Sorry, I was trying to find my cursor to unmute myself. Just simply disappeared. So one of the things that I think is really important, and why this grant, which was developed with Rupika Risam at Salem State, Tanisha Taylor at Texas Southern, and Jamila Moore-Pugh at Cal State Fullerton, one of the things that we wanted to attend to were the ways that regional public institutions are, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback here. Regional public institutions are sort of chronically and perpetually underfunded, while at the same time, we are tasked with doing a tremendous amount of teaching, and a lot of our work is service to the campus community, service to the institution. And so, you know, thinking about the work that DH does in a couple of ways. One is bringing it to an RPI or to RPIs allows us to identify and recognize the people across the nation, right, who've been essentially working in isolation at their institutions. And so we want to identify identify those people and create community. So a big part of this is the creation of a network, a consortium, a community that allows for capacity building across institutions, right? So that we're creating the space for practitioners, people who think about and do digital humanities work, to have that space and have the support to do the work that is so weighted already. The second part of this is, from my perspective, is to really think meaningfully about what it means to be a Black person or Latinx or Indigenous, and to be understood as sort of outside of technology in terms of thinking about it, working with it, while at the same time being the object of technologies, right? And so in the early 2000s, when I was a grad student at the University of Virginia, I actually started a course called Technology and Identities, which later got called Tech and Sensibility when I moved on, which was actually a course that was invested in really having students think through the implications of being digital. And what does it mean to be understood, particularly when you're young, as part of a generation of people who are digital natives or digital fluent, but primarily thought of in the context of consumers and users, and not active agents, right? In terms of thinking about technology, their use, and the implications for us. And so the institutions that I taught these courses were predominantly white institutions. And part of the work is to afford students through the curriculum that we plan to build, afford students at regional public institutions the opportunity, the same opportunities that exists for students at predominantly white institutions to have courses, to have curriculum, to have space, to think through what it means, particularly now when we see campaigns specifically targeting communities of color, right? Whether it is about COVID disinformation or election disinformation, it's actually a really toxic element of technology, right? And so we want to be able to provide this community students with access to ways of thinking through and working through and understanding what it means to be a person of color, and to have technologies impacted on you, but not be thought of as someone who can create or who can think about or who can sort of critique and question the ethics of technology use, technology development. So I'm going to stop because I think I'm taking up a long time, but I just, for me, what VFC allowed me was to be in community with people who were also thinking through these things. So I see the impact of being in community and what it can do potentially for the kind of work that I do at my university.
That's amazing. Thank you, Sonya, so much. I'm so excited about this project, and it leads me to, I don't know how we're doing with time, but sort of the way that you ended, as you were talking, I started thinking about also these sort of strategies for collaboration. And, you generously talked about, being involved with BFC and how that has shifted, it really shows the impact of actually being in community. I would love to hear from all of you about, the sort of methods of collaboration, working together, both on this project, but other projects, and if there's advice or insight that you would have for people that are looking for communities, like how can they get involved with your projects, but also, just things that you've learned around or ways that you approach collaboration. Like what are some just very practical, but also very forward thinking and ethical and kind ways of being in collaboration? Or what are some of your considerations? And I don't know who would like to start.
I'm going to unmute only to ask Claire as our resident artist, right? I would love to hear your perspective on like the collaborative process of working, with the whole team to on the academic tarot projects.
So I guess I was the only one who did the painting, but basically every other element of this project was many conversations between many of us. I remember at first I was not really involved in BFC. I was just supposed to paint 3 cards. So I got a list that I think Liz, Saul, and Hannah put together. Liz was sort of our tarot guru, advising us on like the traditional cards. I actually was not really familiar with tarot before embarking on this journey. So I got a list. It said like, our fool is going to be the grad student. What are the academia versions of each of these traditional cards? What are some other good ones that were on that list? Some of these took a while to come to, but the cohort is going to be the lovers. That was like such a good one. The traditional lovers card would be the cohort, which was the card that Sonya showed at the beginning. But we ended up changing that list so many times. I think we learned about ourselves that the people and characters that we initially chose were not always the best matches for the cards, and also that we'd like left really important people out, who were people who we were trying to represent, like who we were trying to also be able to see themselves in this project. So like I had painted maybe 17 or 18 cards, and we realized we didn't have the person who made this whole pandemic era education possible, the IT specialist. We didn't have an IT specialist. We didn't have anybody who worked in IT, and how critical that was to the academic landscape of the pandemic. So we had like 4 more traditional cards left, and we had to figure out which one of them would work well with the IT specialist. And we ended up choosing the strength card, which I think is so powerful and complex. So each one of these decisions was so many conversations at my house and over email. Stephanie was also super helpful, copy editing our academic tarot reader's guide. And it was so rewarding in that time of such disillusionment, where so many of my personal connections with other humans were just gone. And my trust in my employer was gone, and my work life was gone. It was such a regenerative force to have these people who I could, who we could talk together and create together. That was really healing.
I'm just gonna just very quickly, I think, sorry, Stephanie, is just off of that, just say, you just reminded me of the feeling of collaboration and how it was such a comfort. Just over the past 1.5 to 2 years of working with VFC, I think I forgot what collaboration could feel like when it was healing and good, until this kind of moment where we came together with an action in mind. Like, I think when it's rooted in community and when it's rooted in collective action, it just feels different than when it's rooted in work. So I wanted to, I think that's something I learned. But Stephanie.
I love that focus on actionable items. I think that's something that the VFC does very well. That translation of thoughtfulness and community-based initiation into something that is concrete in some way. When Claire was speaking, I was just thinking briefly about my very sideline but admirational role with the VFC, and in terms of what collaboration can and should or has looked like. And I think for me, something the pandemic has really showed, but I think the VFC really helped me see, is that to say yes to collaborations that feel uncomfortable. In all the senses. I mean, certainly with regard to all of the political and social movements where we need to educate ourselves in ways and in cultures and ideas of thought that are not our own or not ones that we're familiar with. But the digital humanities is very much, in many ways, a foreign language to me. So despite the fact of being surrounded by all these experts, I mean, everyone that is speaking now is far and away an incredible expert. And it's something that I've continued to do, I think, through the pandemic and through this transition of mine, that I am a part of projects, editorial or writing otherwise, that are not my strength by light years. And when it came to, I mean, the writing of the pamphlet, I absolutely had nothing to do with, but just with reading and editing and copy editing, it was so, it's interesting to flex a sort of editorial muscle in an environment where you know that this isn't your language, and you know that this isn't your strength. So it just you're sort of forced to take that sort of sidecar seat, but you can still be involved and learn as the process goes on. So it's kind of like simultaneously generative and a learning space, and also collaboration. And I don't think that those often, at least for me historically, have been possible or gone together. So the VFC helped show me that I could be a part of something or contribute to something that wasn't my strength, and that I could still, be a part of it.
There's so much care that is part of it that kind of illuminates. And so I'm curious whether like all the consideration that's put into each aspect of what you do, between the tarot cards and even the Psychic Friends Network, was that intentional when you kind of came together, or was that something that came out of as a need as it was, you know, expanding and developing?
I think I can say a little bit about this, and I know that Hannah and Brian are folks that, you know, lead us in these moments and have been leading us in these moments, are here in the chat. So please chime in and chat if you want to, y'all. But I think personally, I think I proceeded with care because of the lack of care that I saw. And it's interesting. So someone yesterday, for some reason, I got out Adrienne Murray Brown's emergent strategy again, and I don't know why I did. And then someone actually texted me this morning because they were reading Holding Change, and they texted me the kind of like the principles of emergent strategy, that page. And I was like, I cannot believe I was just looking at this yesterday, but I've been thinking about this, you know, change is constant, be like water, flow into whatever container is there. And I think that, you know, flow into that container with care is at the center of that principle of emergent strategy and of emergence in general too. And I've been thinking about that so much over the past year and a half. And so when you asked that question, I was like, oh, well, that's where it's coming from, right? I'm kind of, we're flowing in the VFC into these containers that emerge, that need us. And that's the kind of movement I'm seeing.
Thank you for that. Thanks. Did anyone else have anything to say on that, or Teresa?
I mean, so I don't know if I can't see the chat, so I don't know if there's any questions in the chat. But I know that we wanted to pull a card for whoever is present here, but I do have one more question that I would love to ask if we have time, which is just, you know, sort of speaking from the heart and from, you know, the sort of emphasis on feelings that is throughout all of the work and all of your literature, the collective's literature. You know, I have my ideas of why bringing feeling into these conversations is so important, but I would love to hear from each of you about like what that means to you to bring feeling in, and why that felt like such an urgency.
I will, I can't speak to the sort of origin stories of feelings, but I will say that I think one of the things that was really important for me to see in the group was that there was a space created for vulnerability. I think in the academy, we tend to be in modes of competition. I think that make it very difficult, if not impossible, right? I mean, it's work, so you probably shouldn't, I used to say, and maybe sometimes I still do, I don't have feelings at work. And so I think, again, what Hannah and Brian and everyone else did was create that space that allowed expressions of vulnerability to be like the normal thing, to be the opposite of what we were constructed to be in the academy, which is to operate in silo, which is to be sort of defensive and protective and competitive. And I think VFC is the space that sort of allows you to open up into a sort of more fuller humanity, and more fuller you, right? we talk, we joke, we cry. Well, I don't cry because I don't cry, no. But it's just a place, I think, a space that allows that, and that, yeah. And I think that actually, deepens the bond that allows the kind of work to take place that needs to take place. Are you gonna cry, Liz?
Maybe. I'm the one that's crying always, y'all.
Yeah. Let's just have a big cry now.
I actually almost did cry when you were talking, Sonya, because that's exactly it. That's exactly what those spaces that we've all created together feel like, this kind of collective, it's collective, right? And I think feelings too, I know one of the motivations was that we wanted people to not feel alone. And hopefully the collection of feelings and the visualization of them, and then the meetups where we're able to talk about them, help people to not feel alone, or at least get a step further.
I'll just add from outside the academy that if last year and this year were not moments to embrace vulnerability, they were not moments to be human, because vulnerability was there. Like Sonya's talking about the silo of the work life. For me, and so many people, millions of people in America alone, that silo was just gone. Like all that's left, and so many people, even for whom they stayed employed, their work lives were just turned upside down. Their entire lives were turned upside down. So the vulnerability was there. And if we weren't going to share it and find ways to process it together, we were going to be incredibly lonely. And I think that's one thing that this space, that embrace of vulnerability was so important for all of us coming together here.
That's really beautiful. All of you, thank you. It's also, I hear you around, like, we're not supposed to be vulnerable at work. And I think that there's also that paradoxical thing when your job is to teach people, and especially in the humanities, to get them excited and to touch them emotionally so that they're, because that's a way that the content actually comes in. I teach creative writing. And so it's like, so much of it is around, teaching students to be vulnerable on the page, and yet this paradox of being in a place that doesn't encourage that. So this is amazing I'm just so grateful for all of you and what you've been doing, and also what you've done and continue to do. I know that there's I would definitely want to, is it a good to other questions in the chat? I'm sorry, I can't see the chat, but also, I want to be mindful of the time and pull a card, or have us pull a card for the.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and pull a card. I don't think there's any questions.
Okay. Sorry, I'm getting dings, and I have very little control here. It seems apropos in some ways that this is the is the one. So who would like to pull a card?
So I'll jump in and say, so, at our monthly First Friday academic tarot readings, usually what happens is I will have folks kind of tell me what's up, like what's going on as I shuffle the cards, because it's important to talk to your decks, right? And then we'll pull a card together. So so I'm happy to kind of act as that human today.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Right.
So do you want? Yeah, so go ahead, you go.
Yeah, well, and if any of my folks have a thing, but I thought I'd maybe just pull a card for like today for us all in this space, and that's the intention that I'll set. So I'll just shuffle a little bit, and then actually if I could get Claire to tell me when to stop. This is what we usually do, where I run my hands over the cards and then someone tells me where to stop. We pulled the department admin. Claire, actually, I love this card and I love the art in this card so much. One of the things that we do at our tarot meetups is that we actually start by reading together what's in our reader's guide. Claire, if you wanted to either talk about the card or read a little bit of what we wrote, that would be amazing.
Sure. The department admin is traditionally the Hierophant. In traditional tarot, the Hierophant represents traditional knowledge and learned wisdom, as well as the institutions and social structures that codify them. The department admin holds the keys that will help you access knowledge. To find those keys, you need to follow the rules and rituals of your community and invest in learning the tools of your trade.
Thank you. One of the things I love about this card is, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about this symbol right here, Claire.
No, you do it.
No. Well, I actually want to say, because I know that we're low on time, and then maybe I'll get you to maybe talk about your art, is we've been talking so much about community that I love that we drew this card, because I don't necessarily think, and this is just my intuition, I actually don't necessarily think that this is about the traditions of our traditional, departments, of our traditional administration. I think this is the traditions that we're building together. And that's just kind of my intuition of pulling this card after our conversation today. But one of the things that we also do in our meetups is I say, like, how does this track? Like, how do you all feel? Like, what are your reflections about drawing this card?
I'm feeling, and I'll say, because I was the one who chose it, it is resonating with me because the department admin is, in a way, like, not seen as the star of the show. The Hierophant, is kind of it's a background role, a backstage role, and I feel like that's just resonating with me today, that I'm feeling as though I'm part of something that's out of my control in a way in my own personal life. And it resonates with me to accept and reflect on that, and also resist the ways in which those traditional structures are not necessarily where I want to be.
That they are not serving you. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I really love the way that the card is thinking about, or that what you mentioned, Liz, about the possibilities for rethinking what kinds of rituals and routines and policies we actually want to have. That there is, I think that I'm one of those that thinks that the structures of things also imbue the energetics of the thing overall. Yeah. And so this to me feels like this potentially very hopeful thing. Like, you can start to think almost formally about the forms of the rituals, the forms of movement and communication, and start to actually enact change through those very through those means. Oh,
I love that. I love that, just by thinking together about those means, those forms, we actually can then enact change because we're thinking together about them. Oh, thank you for that.
Is there anyone else that would like to weigh in? I know we're right at time.
Or if anyone from the audience if this resonated with any of you today, also you can weigh in. And we do understand if anyone has to go, that's okay too.
Also, if you'd like to join our monthly tarot hangs, get in touch with us.
Great. So how would somebody get in touch with you? Just like through the website? Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, this feels maybe like a good place to stop then. So unless there's any other lingering things.
Maybe
And
after party, a dance party. I don't know.
dance party. Yeah. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here today. Thank you, Shameka. We can stop recording, and thank you. Yeah, just thank you and for doing this work. And